Hello everybody, Father Andrew here. Okay, before we get into this, I'm going to admit now, 1. I've wanted to make this video for a while, but never had the motivation to do it. 2. After binge watching, listening to Roanoke Gaming covering Dead Space biology while working on the assets and sets for Primordial, I finally got inspired to cover this guy, which I originally planned to do I think over a year ago? Actually looking back, I planned to make this video, back in March or April last year. Oh fuck, that's 15 to 16 months ago. Anyway, year-long lapses in motivation aside, here we are now, discussing the writing of Dr. Challus Mercer in Dead Space 1 and its remake. Also, sorry if my voice sounds off, I think I might be sick, I don't know. That aside, before I do actually talk about him, I'm going to clarify that I'll be summarizing the lore and writing of these two, and excluding a lot of the extraneous details that, while they do add to the characters, they don't overall change much, it's just flavoring. But anyway, with that elaborated on, now to discuss the Dead Space 2008 version of him. Regarding the original 2008 Dead Space version of Dr. Challus Mercer, he's fanatical to an extreme degree, talking and acting almost like a priest in regards to necromorphs, seeing them as something that will replace humanity. He also devised a plan to help the infection reach Earth by bringing frozen necromorphs to Earth, despite the heavily damaged interior of the ship at that point, which if he succeeded would be immensely devastating given how fast necromorphs can spread. But he overall has extreme reverence for them, even saying at one point,
"Am I the only one who sees that we have died out a long time ago? We just haven't accepted it yet. Stop running. Stop your struggle. Our future, your future, the future of our race ends here. Allow me to introduce you to humanity's child, the children that will replace us, our greatest creation."
In fact, his fanaticism runs so extensively deep, he legitimately sees the necromorphs as divine and as a form of ascension, ultimately going as far as to let an infector kill him to reanimate him as one. While he was alive, however, during the events of the original game, despite suffering marker-induced dementia, Mercer was still able to point out those who were under the influence of the marker as well, such as when Dr. Kyne starts hallucinating his dead wife who died years ago, showing that he is incredibly lucid and self-aware, but he's also hypocritical given he clearly is under the marker's effect too, and he's also a Unitologist, so he obviously would be siding with the marker regardless. He also, while alive, praised Isaac seemingly out of respect on the surface for surviving snare after snare, but ultimately believed that all of Isaac Clarke's attempts to survive on his part were pointless, which makes me suspect that he was doing all of this probably just to mess with Clarke. Why? Because Mercer showed no remorse. He didn't even show interest, concern, or sympathy in the survival of the Ishimura's crew. He only cared about himself during the outbreak, and went out of his way to deliberately make more necromorphs to further his vision of triggering a convergence event and humanity's replacement, even conducting experiments, it seems, that would create new variants of necromorph. So why would he care at all when he clearly never cared about anyone else? It just makes no sense to me, which is why I assume he's just messing with Isaac the whole time. He also clearly had involvement with the creation of the Hunter, the regenerating necromorph, created by placing some of the corruption's tissue inside a human. However, Dead Space Remake 2023 elaborates on this more directly. That aside, he's clearly a psychopathic, fanatical doctor obsessed with what he sees as divine beings, actively going out of his way to add as many bodies to the pile as possible, even himself if needed. In the Dead Space 2023 remake, however, Mercer is presented differently. While still fanatical and pushing for the same end goal, his fanaticism seems to have been dialed back somewhat, preferring to stay human over becoming a necromorph. Still chasing convergence as he believes it would finally allow him to transcend death, however. Albeit his character is pushed more in a mad scientist direction as we learn from holograms, audio and text logs that Mercer was actively studying the outbreak and the marker's effect in his attempt to unlock the marker's secrets and create new necromorph variants, which he still sees as divine holy beings. Fascinatingly enough though, the marker in this version seems to have given Dr. Mercer the knowledge of new surgical techniques and new technical designs evident from drawings all over the office walls in the remake, where an infector is also seen cut open and being studied, and a text log can also be found. While the original version of the game also seems to imply this as well, the 2023 version makes it far more apparent by adding extra detail to the room. Mercer's behaviour in the 23 remake is also significantly more manipulative and predatory, as we see him interacting with patients and carefully luring his victims into becoming subjects for his experiments. One notable patient being Brant Harris, who he injected necromorph biomatter into the brain of in hopes of unlocking the secrets of the marker, which resulted in Harris being able to see the codes that the marker had given him and was telling Mercer that, "They're hungry, they're coming, they'll make us whole." This also beginning Harris's slow transformation into the Hunter. Harris would also be used by the Doctor to gather osmium from the mining deck for his experiments, in which Harris could push a man into the suit kiosk and he'd be crushed by the machinery inside, killing him. Harris would also slowly lose himself as the Necromorph flesh took over in his brain, eventually transforming him completely into the Hunter. Dr. Mercer also seems to have a particular favour for his Hunter, as when Isaac activates the engines and kills it, Mercer insults Isaac for it. It's also very heavily implied that Dr. Mercer conducted specialist surgical operations on the Hunter to enhance its killing and combat abilities, which, combined with the fact that it's heavily implied he was turning other people into Necromorphs as well, means he's definitely responsible for the creation of new variants. That aside, Mercer also dies differently in the remake. He calls out to the marker, begging it for convergence, only for a drag tentacle to wrap around the marker and him, and to crush him as it drags it away, which honestly was pathetic and lame. Anyway, that aside, now I want to move on to talk about how I feel about his character. Honestly, I feel both versions of the character have strong traits but lack in others. I feel like Dr. Mercer from the original 2008, his fanaticism is scary, but why exactly? It's because of how obsessively dedicated to his end goal he is and the lengths he's going to achieve it. This man has spilled the blood of countless people, created monsters, the Regenerator, and shows zero remorse in his actions. If anything, he sees them as justified or cutting down anyone who gets in his way. He's so dedicated he's willing to even die to an infector just like some of his patients, just to get closer to what he sees as ascension. And the fact he's so vehemently dedicated to it is fucking terrifying, especially when you remember the lengths this man has gone to serve the marker. However, I feel he lacks overall character depth, something the Dead Space remake tried to solve by putting in the holograms, the logs, and showing us how he used Brant to create the Regenerator, displaying his predatory, psychopathic, manipulative behavior, which in the remake made him a different kind of horrific, but scary nonetheless, as it highlights just how meticulous and planned out his research and attempts to create new Necromorph varieties actually were, and how he approaches convergence with a different mindset. To him, it was all calculated, carefully made, deliberate attempts at expanding what the Necromorphs were capable of, evident from the Regenerator's capabilities. If anything, it reminds me more of William Afton from the FNAF books researching Remnant, more than any other marker-obsessed fanatical loser from the rest of the Dead Space franchise. Albeit I feel the 2023 remake version of Dr. Mercer lacks the fear factor the original had with his fanaticism, but he's still scary in his own way. However, the way he dies in both games I feel is also something to mention. In the 2008 version, him dying to an infector to become a Necromorph willingly was very fitting given everything he had done and how he viewed the Necromorphs. If anything, that's one of the only ways this story could have really ended. However, I personally wish Isaac got an opportunity to just mag dump the cunt out of existence before he even got the chance to unleash the Regenerator, and also never giving him the chance to be infected, but whatever, a man could dream. However, in the 2023 remake, he begs the marker for convergence like a little bitch and gets crushed by a drag tentacle like a useless chud, which honestly the whole scene just made him look extremely pathetic. He's just there screaming at it like, "Oh, please, bring me convergence, and then he gets fucking squished like a bug on a windshield as you drive your Jeep 70 miles an hour down the I-95. Oh, on that note, fuck modern Jeeps by the way, you pay 80k, you start the engine like 2 to 3 times, then it throws a rod through the engine and kills itself on the spot. Oh, and then insurance, you call them up and they try to avoid paying out the 35k for user error and you're just standing there realizing you lost 115k, like an absolute chud. It's even worse if the wheels touch an inch deep puddle of like water or a bit of sand during off-roading and the engine just stalls and chokes out. Yeah, joy abound, fuck Jeeps. Should have invested in 1967 Plymouth Sport Fury before I think about 31k instead. Superior horsepower with a superior engine. Anyway, rant aside, I feel like instead of him dying by getting squashed like a useless chud, it would have been cooler to see him decide, fuck it, I'm done playing games, snap at Isaac about how he can't stop what's coming, and how he has no choice but to deal with Isaac himself, and then he proceeds to use the marker's gifts, what it taught him, and all his research to turn himself into something horrific, in an attempt to become its strongest warrior so he can kill Isaac and finally cheat death by bringing convergence, or at least that's what he thinks will happen. Maybe his Necromorph form could look something akin to the Tormentor from Dead Space 2, which would in turn chase Isaac, like that one scene in Dead Space 2, which, honestly, the Tormentor was surprisingly underutilized. Besides that, he possibly gets injured and weakened, exposing a weak point, leading to a boss fight set around the marker. During the fight, Mercer is badly wounded to a point where he can't fight anymore, and is downed, effectively rendering him useless and immobile as drag tentacles arrive to haul him away. Meanwhile, the drag tentacles also attack Isaac, who has to defend himself, which shows that the marker never really cared about Mercer, and even in his mutated form, he was just a means to an end, who will now be used for biomass by the hive mind. All of that alongside cranking up his overall fanaticism throughout the game, adding on his priest-like mannerisms and dialogue from the 2008 version, that would have added the best of both versions together in a way that complements both sides. His sheer fanaticism going hand in hand with his research, deciding to become his god's ultimate warrior just to stop you and achieve convergence, would have fit aspects from both versions perfectly. Anyway, besides that, I also feel like he has an overall decent presence in the story of Dead Space and its remake. His appearances are paced fairly well throughout both games, and overall, while we only see him in person a few times and directly interact with him even less, he casts an overall intimidating presence which extends to even when we don't see him directly, like when he uses his rig to call Isaac. Still, when we can see him though, he's always just out of reach, always behind a window or door, preaching about the Necromorphs, almost as if he's taunting Isaac the whole time. He also gets especially ballsy in the remake, hitting Isaac with stasis and walking right up to him just to monologue about his creation, the Hunter, and Convergence. Man, if only Isaac were not hit with stasis, cause he's talking a lot of shit for someone in melee distance. I'm just saying, it would have been super based if we could have hit him with stasis and then meleeed the shit out of him instead. Alas, a man can dream. That aside, overall, I feel like, in summary, Dr. Mercer in Dead Space 1 2008 is a pretty simple albeit effective, terrifying villain, meanwhile his remake counterpart has more depth while still maintaining an intimidating presence, even if it's somewhat undercut by him dying like a complete chump. Which pretty much brings me to the end of this analysis, unfortunately. Was this a short one? Yes, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Anyway, if you enjoyed, hit that subscribe button, the bell, and also have a Discord in the description. Also, cause that darn algorithm it's changed and I'm not entirely sure how it works anymore. Apparently it counts mainly comments and likes as engagement now, and supposedly runs entirely off those. Honestly, I'm not even sure, or if that's even true at all, but regardless, that's all. Goodbye, see you next time, good night.